All right, carbohydrates part 2. We just finished discussing disaccharides and how they were not quite polysaccharides or polymers because though they have two repeating monomers, they are not a long chain. Well, let's talk about what it takes to get there. We have discussed carbohydrates in their linear form and that how they can isomerize into a ringed structure. Well, it turns out when this oxygen reacts with this hydroxide, you get stuck with a hydroxide, and 50% of that time, that hydroxide ends up in the down position here, and 50% of the time, it ends up in the up position here. And so we have glucose, but we have sort of two different shades of glucose, if you will. We've got alpha glucose and beta glucose. And depending on which one you form in your situation, determines what you're going to make. Now, if you link all of those alpha glucose together, you get starch, which is that high energy, delicious, good potatoiness that we like in our vegetables. So those potato, awesome, flavorful greatness, that's the starch molecule. Now over here, am I in the way? Can I move me? Done. Now over here, if we have this alternating chain of alpha and beta glucose, we then get cellulose, which is different. So now we have done it. We have graduated to our third tier of carbohydrates, polysaccharides, which are the true polymers of our carbohydrates. Starch is the high energy, we can digest it, super good polysaccharide polymer that is the food part of plants. Cellulose is kind of the opposite from our perspective. It is the cell walls and a lot of structural components of plants, and humans cannot digest it, but it can be digested by other organisms. Cows can do it, many insects can do it. So, you know, it's just a perspective of where you are on the planet in the biosphere. Cellulose is useful to some and less useful for others, but it is the second polysaccharide. So we've got starch, plants, and we can digest it. Cellulose, made in plants, we can't digest it. And then we go on to glycogen. Now, you can barely see this. I know this is very small font. But this up here is our example of starch. And as you can see, starch forms very long chains. And cellulose is a very similar structure, very long chains. And they're linear with the occasional or rare branching. Whereas glycogen, which is a storage of carbohydrates in animals, is curved, it has lots of branches, it's kind of a jumble. So you can build long structures and you can reinforce them by sort of braiding these strands together to get structural material in plants. You can build the plant body structure out of this. Glycogen doesn't really work that way. Animals don't really build a lot of structure out of glycogen. It's simply an intermediate storage. If your blood sugar is too high, well, then we start taking that sugar out, putting them in glycogen chains so that it's not floating around our blood. So it's an intermediate storage before we start turning that energy into fat for long-term storage. So those are your three polymers, your three polysaccharides for carbohydrates. Starch, made by plants and digestible by us. Cellulose, made by plants, used as a structural component and not digestible by us. And glycogen, an intermediate storage for animals for those carbohydrates. Put it in a chain. Save it for later. Because later we'll need to break it down into sugar and then, you know, do respiration and get ATP. One last note, and it really is just a footnote, and this is chitin. It is a monosaccharide. It is the only monosaccharide we are aware of that has nitrogen. Just one single nitrogen in there. So it's kind of the rule-breaking freak. And it is used to make insect shells. The exoskeleton of insects often include chitin. So there you have it. If there's any final note about carbohydrates, it should be that because it is polar, those sugars can dissolve in the bloodstream and be easily transported throughout a body. And so that makes it very advantageous to complex organisms that we can move glucose around and we can get energy pretty much anywhere we need it to be in the body because it happens to be a polar molecule. And that is it for carbohydrates. Oh, wait. wait, no. I hope this helps, and struggle well.